It's a beer time of year today on Let's Cook. Hi, welcome to a beer time of year on Let's Cook. Now, when I say a beer time of year, normally in the winter, I don't imbibe in a lot of beer. I'm more of a summer beer drinker. I actually love beer in the summer. So today on Let's Cook, we have two very special guests. We have Tim Schaefer, who is the brew chef, and he also operates Tim Schaefer's Cuisine. And then we have Gary Monterosso, a writer for Barbecue and Beverage Magazine, both experts on beer and cooking with beer. We're going to take a little break, and then when we come back, Tim and Gary are going to join me, and we're going to be making some delicious crab cakes with a leaky beer sauce. Don't go anywhere. It's a beer time of year today on Let's Cook. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to a beer time of year today on Let's Cook. Now, before we went to break, I said I had two special guests. I have Tim and Gary here. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Gary, two beer
thanks.
experts. Thanks so much for coming on the show today. Now, Tim, you've been cooking with beer. You're like the beer chef. You're like the king of beers.
That's what they call me.
Except you don't have the horses in the way, king of beers. And Gary, you've been writing about beer for a number of years. And
for about a decade now, yeah.
Now, how did you guys get into beer? As opposed to wine or what?
Well, I can answer that. I'm a teacher full-time, and the parent of one of my students gave me a book about beer for Christmas one time. I guess about maybe 15 or 20 years ago. And I thought, my gosh, you mean people can make money writing about beer? It sounds like a pretty cool occupation. That's right. And I really enjoyed beer for a long, long time. But I got to the point that I was getting tired of the taste of beer because there was just no variety. And looking at this book and basically getting out and exploring different types of beers really turned me on to it. So I basically contacted my local newspaper. I live in southern New Jersey, not that far from Atlantic City, and said, hey, you know what? Let me give you a one-shot column on a beer festival. Let me review it. And if you like it, maybe we can talk. They liked it. They picked me up for a column. Things just exploded after that.
Good for you. And Tim, how long have you been cooking with beer?
About as long as I've been drinking it.
Okay.
But kind of
2, 3 years?
Yeah, just a few. Actually, I won a trip to the Great American Beer Festival about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Went out, found out we had about 4,000 breweries here in America producing premium quality products. And just kind of came upon it accidentally using wine with most of my cooking. Graduated in the Culinary Institute of America, usually trained to cook with wine. Half the beer went in the belly, half the beer went in the pan. That started the brew chef tradition right there. But it's fun. It's an integral part of my cooking repertoire. And it's really fun to cook with.
I love to cook with beer, and I get a lot of emails requesting cooking with beer. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to start I came up with a leaky beer sauce or a beer leek sauce. So I'm going to ask you in the pan here, if you could just sweat some leeks with some roasted peppers and a little bit of butter. And while you do that, I'm going to start on my crab cakes, which I really like. And now, Gary, what type to make my crab cakes? Let me just go over the ingredients. But while I'm putting the ingredients in here, which are mayonnaise, mustard, egg, cayenne pepper, parsley, peppers, good lump crab meat, and 1 egg to bind it. And then I use fresh breadcrumbs. What beer would you recommend to go with this?
Well, I really like wheat beers, and there are different varieties of wheat beers. Wheat beers are very, very flexible. They offer a variety of tastes. They're spicy, fruity. One can taste elements of clove, banana, apple, pear, even a little bit of bubble gum. Sounds a little funky, but it does work.
Bubble gum.
Yes, exactly. And it is a very, very flexible drink.
Now, when you say wheat beer for our viewers, what is the difference, let's say, between, a wheat beer and another type of beer? It's just a grain that's used. What's a normal grain that's used to make a beer?
Well, barley. Barley is the principal ingredient in beer. And in fact, when we talk about a wheat-based beer, it's not 100% wheat. Normally, we're talking about maybe anywhere from 40 to 75% wheat, and barley supplements the rest. Wheat is a difficult grain, actually, to brew with. The barley stabilizes it a bit.
Now, what is the difference, let's say, between a wheat beer and, let's say, a barley or a normal beer?
Well, the wheat beers tend to be, I've mentioned the flavor profile and aroma can vary a bit, but they're also creamy, usually a nice head retention, very thirst quenching, nice and light, perfect for warm weather. Alcohol
Very
content.
low alcohol.
Very,
What's
yeah.
the percentage of alcohol in
Well,
them?
it can vary, but we're usually talking 4 or 5% or so. You do have an option when you get into the winter months. Some of the winter wheats can be a tad more, but for the summer, we want like something nice and light and fruity and thirst quenching. And wheats do that.
Wheats do that.
Oh, yeah.
You like wheat?
I love wheat beer. Wheat beer, to me, I know you like beer just during the summertime. We like beer all year round. And wheat beer is probably the most versatile of beers as far as pairing them with foods. They go great with seafood. You know, the darker wheat beers like Ramstein's Winter Wheat goes great with steak and venison. And as long as you keep those bubblegum flavors out of there, you know, it really is a traditional.
That's right, exactly.
Okay, that's good. If you could just add the beer to that now, just and let that cook down. Now, what I did with my crab cakes, because I love crab cakes, is I mix my wet ingredients together and I just fold it into crab meat. And then what I do is I just take it, and it's really almost all crab, no filler. I just take them like this, make them into little balls this way, and then I just coat them with fresh breadcrumbs and pan fry them up. Now, this is a good question for both of you guys. Which came first, wine or beer?
I think we'd like to say beer.
I
We
know.
talked about this earlier.
I can tell you the beer evidence of beer goes back at least 4,000 BC.
Okay, and the first beer was made with mead, right?
Actually, yeah, honey. It would be a honey, yeah.
Just fermented honey.
Fermented honey. That's what mead is. Yeah, it's fermented honey.
Okay.
And there is evidence I mentioned going back thousands of years.
Tim, could you put a little bit more beer in that sauce?
A little
here?
more beer in there?
Just a little bit
I don't
more.
have much problem with that.
What are you adding to that, Tim?
This is actually Dick Yinling's Lager.
Okay.
From Pennsylvania, one of the oldest still producing beer breweries in America.
Now the other thing is, a lot of people do get confused about beer, or you go to the supermarket, you have mass-produced beers, which are relatively inexpensive.
Yeah.
And then you have those that are boutique beers, or that are a lot more expensive.
Hard to find sometimes.
Hard to find too, where a lot of operations will stick with the
More basic.
more basic
Popular.
beers.
You actually have now also what's called brew pubs, places where
Now, if you can
That
keep
sounds
it,
great.
hold on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but we got to switch now. We're switching because the crab cakes are going there, and I'm just going to take the sauce and puree these. And you can see the crab cakes. They look good, right?
They look perfect.
Good. I love crab cakes, and I especially like beer with crab cakes.
oh, it goes wonderfully together.
Okay. Now, the nice thing about this sauce that I came up with is you can just take the leeks with the beer, and you don't. All I do is I really cook out the bubbly, not really the alcohol, just the. I was having trouble saying the effervescence.
That's why we call them bubbles.
Yeah.
What, the bubbles?
I love bubbles.
See, I thought you guys were going to be real technical and not
Yeah.
bubbles.
We're beer drinkers. We'll
We're
call
going to
them
cook the
bubbles.
bubbles out of
All
the
right,
beer.
we'll cook the bubbles out.
So I'll just take this, and I season this heavily with pepper now. Heavily with pepper and just a little bit of salt. And I'll just blend this in the blender. And this is good to go. And how are the crab cakes?
They're perfect.
Okay, we're going to shut these off.
Nice.
Okay, now, actually, we're going to plate this up now. Very quickly. If you could just, here, there's a nice plate right here. We can use this one right here. I'll just put a little bit of the sauce right there. And if you could just give me a nice crab cake on top of the leaky beer sauce here, we can present this. And then when we come back, we're going to take a little break. But then when we come back, Tim, this is one of your items that we're making next, which is
The oat crusted salmon fillet. Very tasty.
and that also
Beer sauce.
a
Yeah,
little
with
beer
wheat beer blanc.
wheat beer
Wheat beer blanc.
wheat beer blanc. Don't
Wheat.
go anywhere. It's a beer time of year today on Let's Cook. I'm here with Tim Schaefer and Gary Monterosso. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Let's Cook, where it is a beer time of year. I'm here with Tim Schaefer and Gary Monterosso. And Tim, we have this next item this is actually your recipe.
Yeah.
So what are we?
Original brew chef recipe.
Original brew chef recipe. So what are we doing?
Well, we're doing an oat crusted salmon fillet. Although I grew up on oatmeal.
Me
I
too.
didn't use it much on salmon when I was
Me
a kid.
too.
So nice dish because oats have a nice caramelization. Oats are also an ingredient in the brewing process, an oatmeal stout. So kind of indigenous to the cuisine, I like to say. It goes really nice with salmon. Goes real nice with chicken. So today we're going to do salmon.
You're going to do salmon now. What did you spice these up with?
We spice them up with all the little brown spices. We use a little cinnamon, a little nutmeg, a little allspice. You can use ginger, a little bit of kosher salt and pepper.
Okay.
Simple, easy.
And then we have this beautiful boneless.
Yeah, these are really cool.
Yeah,
this
this
is a boneless salmon steak, which I have never seen before.
which is netted so that it'll stay together. It's beautiful.
It's really
so
cool. Easy to work with.
you're going to go ahead and start that in the pan?
Let's get a little bit of oil going in the pan.
And you don't even have to use flour.
No.
Egg.
Not for this.
Just
No, nothing. No standard breading procedure. Just, I guess just the natural albumin and protein in the fish helps the crust to stick. And we like that.
You don't chop this up at all. Just a whole flake thing.
Yeah,
I love it.
There's two kinds of oats out there. There's the old-fashioned oats and the processed oats. And the processed oats are usually chopped up, steamed, and you don't get the nice caramelization out of them. So I like the nice big oats. It looks really pretty.
I too grew up on oatmeal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oatmeal and Limburger cheese, right?
No, just oatmeal. Gary, while he's getting this in the pan, we were talking about different wheat beers in a segment before. Now, the specific wheat beer that you brought, could you just tell us a little bit about that?
I'd be happy to. This is from a company called the Boston Beer Company, and I think we're a little more familiar with the name Sam Adams Beers.
Okay.
And that's pretty much known throughout the world.
But it's a Weiss beer now.
Yes, it is. And it's a Bavarian style, which again, as I mentioned earlier, brings in some of the clove and banana flavors and aromas for that matter. Boston Beer has had a lot of success with this. This beer won 2 awards last year, 2002, won an award over in England, and very recently, June of 2003, won an award in Idaho for brewing excellence.
Wow.
So it's highly respected. Yep.
And now this beer is different than this style beer that you brought.
Well, I brought a very local beer actually from Butler, New Jersey, High Point Wheat Beer Brewing Company. Excellent, probably, in fact, in Bon Appetit magazine in July. So they let me know. Congratulations to them. But they make a Cristal, which is a highly filtered, light in color, but very full flavored wheat beer, as well as their winter beer, which is dark and full bodied. And I think about the same alcohol content, but both very friendly to cook with. Today, I'm going to use the light.
You're going to use the light to make this beer sauce, okay? I'm going to turn this up a little bit for you. Now, Gary, I'd like you to, if you could, we have some different beer glasses here, and I want to pour some of these wheat beers out so people can see them. And maybe you could explain a little bit about that while we start. This is good. You're good to go there, Chef.
Well, I'll start with the Sam Adams, the wheat beer. And as Tim mentioned, this is an unfiltered beer. And you'll notice that there's good head retention, good foam, a little bit cloudy.
Now, why this glass as opposed to the Pilsner glass?
I chose this because it has a little wider opening, and this has a lot of nice aromas going on there, and I just like to pick up on them. So if I find a beer that's very aromatic and flavorful, I like to bring it out a bit more by selecting a glass that accentuates it, so to speak.
Okay, now what about the wheat beer that you brought? Yeah, let's turn this over here. You can turn that one. Yeah, want to get a little bit more color. What about the one Tim, if you could pour, what about the one you pour?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll pour the beer that I'm going to cook with, and this is their classic. Not a typical beer glass, but hopefully pretty, so it'll work. Once again, like Gary said, it's got a nice open top to it, more of a goblet style, able to release the nuance of the beer.
Now, this one is totally unfiltered, correct?
This one is actually filtered.
Oh, it is.
And it's just a darker beer. It's aging. Wheat beer ages very easily. I'm going to pour a little bit of the dark later, and you'll see that it's much darker and more viscous than that beer. Tasty.
This is a company also, if I may mention, High Point, that pretty much exclusively makes wheat beers. They've just gotten into some lagers very recently, but they basically have survived just making wheats. It's a style that was considered dead a few years ago.
Yeah, because a lot of people in this country, they tend to, it's wheat beer, popular beer?
It's getting more popular, yeah.
It's sweeter. Now, that's the other thing I'm so glad you mentioned it, because a lot of people, for instance, don't like beer. I'll talk to people and they say, I don't like beer. I just don't like beer. No, well, if you wanted to start somebody or wanted to introduce beer to somebody who, let's say, did not like beer, what would you start them with?
I might start them on a wheat beer, to tell you the truth. Again, because it is so light and so many things going on within that glass of beer. Yeah.
Complexity,
what's going on? I mean, what's going on with it?
Well, we got all these flavors and aromas taking place. And again, it's so light and thirst quenching. It's really a good starter beer. Sometimes they call them transitional beers. Transitional meaning that it's maybe a person's first foray, if you will, into the craft brewing industry.
Now,
so people
It's okay. Now, Tim, I just wanted to show everybody right here. We're going to get if you could put that back on here, Tim. We're just going to get a little shot because what we did with the salmon is we actually finished. This is the one that we just seared off here. This is the one that we had in the oven. So I'm just going to switch these around here so that because you would actually finish this salmon.
Yeah, probably 5 minutes in the oven tops.
And if you want to go over how to make the sauce here, get the sauce going, Tim, because this is a beer sauce. And a lot of people have questions on how to cook with beer. Because let's say if you're using alcohol, you're going to flame it off a little bit, okay, or you're going to reduce it down. I mean, my rule of thumb is when I cook with alcohol, if it's distilled, I will flame it, and if it's just fermented, I reduce. I mean, that's my...
Well, the stronger alcohol flavors tend to be bitter and a little astringent, so beer tends to get a little sweeter. But what we did here is a little bit of oil, a little bit of chopped shallot. I'm going to go right into the pan with the beer. Okay, just want to get a nice color on the shallots. Woo! Okay, that's going to reduce down quick. Chef, you can hand me over that stock.
A little bit of stock in there. How much stock?
There's a couple of ounces in there.
Okay.
That's great. That's
all right.
great.
We just let that cook down.
Beautiful.
Yeah, you just let that cook down. Are you going to have to strain this at all, Tim?
No, not really. I like to leave the shallots in there. If you like to, make it a little clear, you can strain it, but that's okay. Really, no need. A little bit of time now.
A little bit of time.
I'll probably finish it with a little.
Now, how does time go with beer? What kind of spices go with beer? That's another.
Depending on the beer, a lot. I mean, fresh herbs. Wheat beer is a very herbaceous beer, I think, to begin with. So wheat beer tends to work well and lend itself to a whole variety, a whole gamut of herbs. But it all depends on the beer.
All depends on the beer.
The base flavor of the beer.
But for instance, earthy flavors. What would you want to use like for the earthy flavors of beer? Because beer does have a earthy flavor.
We're going right back to the wheat beer because I think out of all the beers, wheat beer is really the earthiest, the more
It's the most flexible beer really to work with that I found.
It's a real food beer.
Food
friendly. Flavors
exactly.
friendly with food. So.
Food friendly. Okay. Now, well, if we could just move these two glasses out of the way, because you've also brought two other beers, Gary, that we'll put them out right out here on the counter, and I just want you to explain what those beers are.
This is a really interesting beer coming from a little brewery in Delaware. The brewery's called Dogfish Head Brewery. Okay. And it's an interesting name. Sounds like a 60s rock group, I think, doesn't it? But the owner of the company, a fellow by the name of Sam Calagione, basically was contracted to recreate a beer that was, or a drink that was probably served during the funerary feast of King Midas.
The funerary, that means funereal.
Yes.
Okay, or funeral. He was dead.
He was dead.
Okay, good. We need to know that.
Stiff is what he was. Yeah. And basically, the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology 50 years ago excavated and analyzed what was left in about 100 drinking vessels. And they found basically nothing at the time, 50 years ago, because scientific methods weren't that developed. Well,
so what is this flavor with it?
What it really is it's a hybrid. It's a combination of beer. Actually, it's mostly beer. It's about 60% barley beer, 20% muscat grape, which makes it a wine.
Yes.
And the final 20% is mead, which is the fermented honey.
Wow.
Now, it has a little kick to it. Comes in 9% alcohol by volume.
9% alcohol. Is that because of the muscat?
Beer.
Is that because of the muscat?
Well, it's primarily because of the mead. Because of the honey, There's a lot of fermentable sugars in there.
Okay. Wow. Very interesting. And you actually
really
have some of the ingredients that are used to flavor another beer, but we're going to talk about those when we come back. We need to finish this sauce. We have to, and then we have to go to break because we only have a few minutes left before the show actually closes. And we're just so engrossed in a beer time of year today. Let's cook that. A lot of information to get in, but so we're going to talk about just finishing the sauce here right now. So how would you finish this?
Well, like I said, this is a takeoff of a beurre blanc, classic French wine reduction. So I've reduced the beer with the shallots in a little bit of time, added a little bit of malt vinegar because it's light in color, light in flavor. I'm simply going to finish it with a couple of tablespoons of butter. All right.
And this, we're just going to swirl it around. A beer bourguignon. Just melt that butter right in there. It's going to help to thicken it a little bit with a little butter. Mount it with a little butter. Okay. While you mount this with butter, we do need to take a little break. I'm just going to take the netting off the salmon steak here. When we come back, we're going to show you this delicious oak-crusted salmon steak and talk a little bit more about beer-inspired dishes. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to Let's Cook and a beer time of year. Now, today on the show, we talked about 4 great wheat beers, and we're going to show you them right here. Different Weiss beers or wheat beers out of this world. Now, Tim, you have your salmon here that you're going to finish with your
beer blanc sauce.
Your beer blanc, wheat beer blanc,
Yes.
actually, your wheat beer blanc sauce. So you want to finish the salmon
little
with that?
sauce on it. Came out
Okay.
great.
Little sauce on that.
Off,
And, you know, while he's saucing that, there was one beer here that we only have about less than a minute. Actually, we don't have time to talk about this, but this beer right here, Gary, what is this?
It's called
flavor?
Berliner Kindelweiss. It's also a wheat beer. It's a sour wheat.
Sour
only
wheat.
2.5% alcohol, extremely tart, and that's why we have 2 adjuncts. To the left would be some raspberry, extract of raspberry, and to the right, Woodruff, which is an herb
Woodruff.
grown in Germany.
An herb. It's so, and how do you say this beer again?
We call this Berliner Kindelweiss.
Berliner Kindelweiss. I'm going to end it with that word today on Let's Cook. We're all going to take
It's
a
for
nice, this one for me.
And Mr. Schaefer.
This is for you, Tim.
And
And
cheers.
great salmon dish, Tim.
Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on the show. Everybody out there, thank you for watching Let's Cook. Cheers, everybody.